GFB, Grown Folks Bidniss, by Hall Cruz. Old schoolers used to say time ain't nothing like money. Some folks got more money, but everybody got the same amount of time. The difference twixt a wise person and a foolish person is what they be doing with the time they have. There's much to learn from such unrefined wisdom, for it implies that time, if spent prudently and industriously, has more value than money. Geraldine had heard this saying all her life, though she thought of it less as a commentary on the worth and use of time, and more as the old folks' sly way of trying to sway young ones to consider doing chores as more profitable than being idle. Gerry wasn't against working around the house. Nothing could be further from the truth. Neither was she opposed to being as busy as a beaver. She simply felt there was a time for everything, including rest. Even God took it easy for a little bit after he finished creating the whole wide universe, right? Gerry often reasoned. Having spent the better part of that morning washing, scrubbing, cleaning, and working up a dripping sweat, it stands to reason that Gerry had no qualms about taking time out in the afternoon to unwind on the front porch. So she draped herself across the wicker rocker and lazily dangled one of her long caramel-colored legs over the arm of the faded green chair. With one leg up like that, she had a chance to examine her recently painted toenails, which exactly matched the pink flip-flop shoe nonchalantly suspended on the tip of her big toe. Gerry gave an approving smile as she swung her loose leg back and forth. Truth be told, the muggy dog days of summer frequently drove her to seek refuge in the oversized rocker on her big front porch. Gerry loved that vintage rocking chair. She'd rocked in it as a precocious toddler, and as far back as she could remember, it was part of her life. Now she could only see remnants of the green finish, once deeply staining the wood, and the tightly woven wicker. Many times she was told of the chair's provenance, which extended back to the slavery days of her grandma, grandpa, great aunts, and great uncles. It was one of the few furniture pieces her Gramma Mae was allowed to take with her when the Mason family left the Smith-Johnson plantation, among the last operating in Thomasville, Georgia. The one piece Geraldine absolutely begged her grandma to give to her as a housewarming present for her new home. Besides, the way Gerry figured it, the butt whipping she got from Gramma Mae on the days she caught Gerry carving her full name on the inside of one of the chair's legs meant she'd already paid a dear price for ownership. Gerry's gaze slowly drifted to a warped slat in the cedar porch, and then down the length of the narrow, oak-lined street. Laurel Street was a sleepy, obscure lane in a quiet area on the west side of downtown Tampa. A few vacant lots remained, but most of the street was adorned with neatly kept frame houses occupied primarily by black folks, with a few white and Italian families sprinkled here and there. A muffled sound of a baby crying wrestled with the soulful song softly playing on somebody's radio. Gerry slowly rocked and popped her sweaty fingers to the beat. She liked that song, but to her dismay, the song soon ended and the faint voice of the radio DJ announced, "The king himself turning up the heat with his big hit tune, Hold Me Tight." Speaking of heat, today's forecast calls for temperatures in the high 90s with only a slight chance for scattered afternoon showers. No joke. Tell me something I couldn't already guess, Geraldine retorted as she unbuttoned the top button of her pink and white gingham dress, grasped a tall jelly jar filled with ice water from the nearby iron table and soothingly rolled a wet glass across her sweaty chest. That was the forecast, but truth was, the forecast hadn't changed for the last 3 days, and it was destined to be the same the next day. Only May, and it had already started up again, just like last summer in Tampa. Another heat wave. Back then, 3 folks died because they couldn't take the heat no more. Gerry didn't mind the heat so much, except she was somewhat anxious about keeping a decent hairdo. Having to shell out a whopping $4.25 each time she had her hair done was no fun, and there wasn't a faster way of spoiling a black girl's hair than the swells of sweat generated because of the hot Florida sun. More to the point, she was on a very tight budget, and a do had to last at least 2 or 3 weeks. Why, it was only last night when Miss Essie, the Laurel Street beautician, spent a couple of hours pulling a scorching hot comb through Gerry's thick, long, kinky hair, and then another hour or so twisting curls with a tarnished, old broken-handle hot curler. After a good straightening and curling, Gerry always marveled at how her tight, 2-inch afro transformed into a cascade of shoulder-length, greasy ringlets. Gerry gently ran her fingers through her smooth, slippery curls and grinned. So far, her do was still intact. After taking a lingering sip of ice water from her jelly jar, Geraldine gazed at the sepia picture on a tattered Mills Funeral Home's cardstock fan. Willie Grayson Mills, owner and director. You sure is some kind of handsome, Mr. Mills. Yep, she thought, he's a good-looking black brother. But that meant nothing to her now. It meant nothing at all. While appreciating the fineness of the local mortician, Gerry deliberately massaged the smooth gold band that securely wrapped the second finger of her left hand. The thin ring, tangible evidence of her spoken vows, was placed there 7 months before by her soldier husband, John Withers. Gerry met the down-to-earth Carolina man while she was working a part-time job at the commissary of the local military base. 2 or 3 times a week, he'd come by her store register to talk fresh to her, or to hastily pass a scribbled note across the counter. Although many women reckoned John to be fine as wine, Gerry wasn't particularly attracted to him. Not at all her type. His light skin, naturally curly hair, hazel eyes, and lean, somewhat muscular physique didn't do it for Gerry. But he was nice to her and offered her the world on a silver platter, or as much of the world as he could give on soldier pay. For months, John had asked Gerry more than once to marry him, and she'd repeatedly turned him down. But only 8 months back, his timing was right. Gerry was at her wits' end with Gramma Mae. After nearly 28 years of Mae Mason's heavy, child-rearing hand, enough was enough.